All right, happy to be joined by my next two guests on the Sports Card Shop guest line. I got to meet them in person about 6 weeks ago at the National in Chicago. They set up at their first national, and I purchased one of my three big purchases, I'll say, or two big purchases that I made during the show from them. And want to, they're dealers and collectors like myself. And so we're going to talk about some of the dynamics of all that and the national, obviously, as well. The Sports Brothers, Dave and Jim Childers, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so guys, I'm a dealer myself. I think you do without knowing. I know you travel for shows, so I don't travel as much as I did when I was a younger dealer. So I venture to guess you probably do more shows than I do. But kind of, you guys are obviously brothers. Talk about kind of how you got your start in the hobby. Did you collect as young kids, and then just kind of come up through the ranks and stay with it, or is your story similar to most? Like I got out and you came back. Kind of just it's a little background.
Well, I'm 8 years older than my brother, so I started collecting before him. And
Yeah,
times I hit 16, I was too cool of a teenager to collect anymore. So I ended up giving my whole collection to him, and he thankfully kept it. And when he got heavy into it, I kind of got back into it with him, and we've been doing it ever since. And at one point, we even opened a shop for a couple of years, and then just turned out it's a lot more fun to travel around and not have all the
Overhead.
overhead and the headaches that come with the shop. It's just a lot easier.
yeah, no doubt. What I want to know, did you pay your brother back for the cards he gave? Like then once you were both back.
No, we just kind of split everything. It's like brotherly love. Just give it to me. It's like hand me downs. The clothes they don't fit him. Well, they fit me.
Yeah, that's funny. And I had a store from in the '90s, from like '92 to '97, and I loved it. I wouldn't trade the experience for anything. But
Yeah.
like I've said on the show, eBay kind of came along then, and in '97 I was 25 years old, and a lot of my friends hey, we're going to this state for a rock concert. You want to go? And a lot of times it was my day at the store, and I had to say no, I can't make the trip. And then eBay kind of came along, and as we all know, wasn't what we know it as today, but it was an opportunity to kind of sell, 24/7. Yeah, basically
Yeah.
had
Yeah, it is.
an invisible card store, and so you could sell something at 2 in the morning while you're sleeping, and I call it a blessing and a curse. Not everything about eBay is good. Not everything about eBay is bad. But the blessing, in a way, for me, guys, then was it allowed me to kind of had a partner in the store. We worked out a deal. He bought me out with like mutual owned stuff. I still had my own personal stuff, and I start traveling and doing shows as well, eBay and shows. So I did a lot of. I'm on the East Coast, so I did a lot of Massachusetts, Connecticut, here in New York, where I am, Pennsylvania, even a little bit into Ohio. And it was when I wanted to, and it also freed me up to say yes instead of no to when friends would invite me to different things. And so I kind of brought me back uh, to that. You do, I know you do modern and vintage. At the show I saw
Yeah.
a lot of vintage. Um, what do do you do both because you enjoy both, or just so that your customers can have sort of a variety? You're not, in other words, cutting anyone out.
I, I enjoy both. I really enjoy the vintage better. More than my love is the vintage. And I'm sure his is too. But I just
Yeah.
enjoy baseball. That's my favorite sport. You know, what kid doesn't want to be an MLB player? And 12 years old was when I did my first show, actually selling. And I was selling the newer stuff at that time. It was like '91 Premiere. And then the Stadium Club came out, the new shiny card, and I was trying to get that stuff to sell it. so I can go buy my Yogi Berra, my Jackie Robinson, stuff like that. So up until now, it's pretty much the same thing. We sell a lot of the new stuff to buy the vintage cards.
This is the first show.
And it's the first show. The National was the first show that we've actually
put
vintage out, like all of our vintage. Most of that was kind of PC / I'm just going to hold on to it for a little bit, but it was a great showcase to put it out and show everybody what we've got.
Oh, that's it. So normally, like prior to the National, if I would have went to the show you're set up at, I would have said I would have saw 100% vintage or 100% modern.
Yes.
Yeah, more than likely, just all modern.
Yeah. So what was that's interesting. I find it. What made you say we're gonna put some vintage out just because it's a National and you want to make sure, you have as much out there, that sort of thing? What was the mindset going into the National?
We were just tired of hoarding it.
Yeah.
We've had it sitting there for 30 plus years, most of it, and it was just time to change it up a little bit. And we combined two collections, mine and his. It used to be separate. Now everything's all one, and everything is under that one name, the Sports Bros, and just pretty much treat it like a business now.
And a lot of it too is when you have the vintage out at the tables and the showcases, I've noticed people who are trying to sell or trade that have vintage, if they don't see it, they just walk by. They don't ask, hey, do you collect vintage? Do you buy vintage, trade vintage? They just keep walking by. So it's easier just to have a few pieces in there. Okay. So now we just put a whole showcases in and then vintage is just walking up now. It's great.
That's a great point. That if you don't have vintage and someone's trying to move their vintage, you may miss an opportunity to acquire, some or all of what they have available. You don't think about that, but it's a great point that people will judge you. They don't see vintage; they'll just assume you don't have any or you don't like it, or both. And when it's not necessarily the case, like you said, you were doing shows where you were putting all modern out, but vintage was where your heart was.
Yes.
And so, that's a great point that by putting it out there, people know kind of you're at least interested and know about it, right? And want it. So, you don't think about little things necessarily like that or what the impact of those decisions can be. The show circuit, what is that for you? Are you doing a lot of out of state show? You're based in Reno, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
How far? I mean, obviously the National, it's own Super Bowl of the hobby, I call it. But and for your normal show circuit, how far do you travel? Where do you set up at shows?
We've done Chicago Sports Spectacular. We're getting ready to do Burbank. We leave for Burbank tomorrow for the Burbank sports card show. Right after that, we'll do Dallas the week later. We do shows in Sacramento, Northern California area, San Francisco.
Just pretty much wherever we can get to.
Yeah. Arizona State card show coming up in November. We'll do that one. It's something that's easy to fly to or easy to drive to,
Yep. No doubt. I always want, I don't do, like I said, I used to do a lot more out of state shows, guys, than now. I did one in Springfield earlier this year. But normally I don't. I kind of stay local to New York. And it always amazes me when, especially at the National, right? But any, there's a lot of shows that are getting big. You mentioned a bunch. Burbank's huge. Dallas Card Show in its own right. Many people say it's the next best show to the National. I've been there twice myself. It always amazes me. People who come from other states, like, how do you get your cards there? For me, like, so before, like, when I do even my local shows, my car is packed to the gills. Like, I can't even put one more shoebox in there. It's like Jenga, like just squeezing showcases and monster boxes and graded card cases. Like, it's a science to get everything in there. And then, someone asked me, like, why don't you set up at the National? And one of the first things I say is, like, I don't know how I'd get, like, and if I'm gonna do it, I want to bring all my stuff, right? How do you get your stuff to all these out of state locales?
Go ahead. You tell them. We have a good story for you from the National.
Yeah, from the
Okay.
anything we're flying to, it's you take all of your high end and you put them in a backpack. Each of us will carry a backpack and one carry on. You try to load the carry on and your backpack with as much the high end stuff that you don't want to take a chance on losing.
Yeah.
And everything else you just pack really good down below in your luggage. But this last one for the Chicago National, our flight got delayed with Delta, and we had 3 boxes.
Yeah,
about $300,000, $250,000 in cards get lost on.
I'm not
flight.
laughing. I'm
3
laughing
days
because it's just. I mean, I'm assuming this has a happy ending.
It has a great ending.
Yeah,
yeah.
But man, that's a big fear. That's a big fear. I think
a huge fear.
Even when you're mailing cards, you know what I mean. Just let alone flying. So, but go ahead.
Oh yeah. Well, the flight was delayed, and then for about 5 hours, and then went to 6 hours, and then they just canceled it and said we're changing you to a United flight, and you've got like 45 minutes to get across the terminal there at O'Hare. And they didn't transfer our bags to United, so we didn't see them for 3 days.
So, needless to say, we were stalkers at the airport here in Reno 3 nights in a row, waiting for the last flight from Chicago to come in every night. And then it was like seeing, a long lost relative when they showed up at the airport on the 3rd night, finally. So it was pretty crazy.
But that's
all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did it get lost? So you had your, like you said, and this is what I do. You have your personal bag, your carry-on bag. That's where you put your most valuable of inventories, and then you check bags with still valuable cards, but not the top shelf stuff. They lost your luggage on the way to Chicago.
From Chicago to Reno, going home.
Oh, going home. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
home.
Well. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not that you want it lost at all. I was just thinking, did you not have all your inventory at the show? So no, it was going home. So you had to keep going. Were you going to the airport to check just on your own, or did they say we'll call you when we find it and it comes back?
It was trust issues because I didn't think they would call me, so I wanted to be there every night to make sure when it gets there, I want it. So it was just that was too much to lose.
Yeah. I got to ask you, if it would happen to me, like if I would have been in that situation, I mean, did you tell them like what's in it, or did you just say like there's a lot of like important stuff?
I don't let we don't want to let anybody know what was in it. I'm not saying I don't trust them, but I just it's just luggage. We'll just tell them it's just luggage.
Do you think they thought it was odd that you were like checking in every day? Just like, how important are these sweatpants?
Told them there was medicine in there. We had medicine in there that we had to have, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, what I can imagine being, and this is just for fun. Like, I can imagine being like an airline employee, and like, these guys are back here again. Like, what's in there? Like cocaine? Is this like they're not saying what's in there, but what should we like call the authorities and kind of give them a heads up?
Exactly.
Maybe we should check this before we hand it back. But you know what? I would be the same way. I wouldn't advertise that there's sports cards in there. Look what we see happen with stuff shipped in the mail and mailmen, open.
Exactly.
And I would be scared, guys. I'm sure you were too. The thought crossed your mind too. Even, sometimes they randomly will check luggage. I'll open up a suitcase. I've had that happen. The last, not this Chicago show, but the last Chicago show, there was a note like, hey, your bag was selected. I only had clothes in that bag. But I'm thinking, imagine that happens and the guy opens the suitcase, sees all these cards. It happens to be a card collector, right? And maybe not an honest guy, unfortunately, or an honest person, right? That's how my mind works. I'm sure you had all those scenarios probably go through your mind.
Oh, yes.
Wow. Now, I know some people ship their stuff, like literally mail it and then pick it up at like a shipping location. Is that something you thought about, or you just thought I'd rather have it in the same container with me, being the plane.
I thought about it, but it's just I'd rather have it with me. It's easy. We've never had a problem before, and I think I don't want to blame the airlines or anything like that. Like it was malicious, but they just didn't get the bag to us in time on the other flight. That's all it was. But
Well,
it's
yeah,
kind
go
of
ahead.
hard to ship. It's kind of hard to ship. At least like you're saying, at least we know it's underneath the plane with us.
Yeah.
But shipping, it may not get there, or it may not get there on time.
Yeah, and I guess if you have a choice, better to like be missing it on the way back after the show than not have that inventory.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for
of the
sure.
show. Plus, it would have been real difficult to get from being in Chicago already to get back to O'Hare, even to pick it up. I mean, I'm sure you would have found a way to do it, but the difficulty would have been increased because it's not your home, your home airport and whatnot. So, I mean, when you got your luggage when you finally got it back, I mean, I would be going it over with a fine tooth comb, like make sure everything is there. I'm assuming you did the same.
Oh yes.
Yes. Yeah. Everything was intact still. All taped up inside in the bags, and the bags just had some wear and tear from sitting around for a couple of days. That was about it.
Yeah. Does that experience change kind of your mindset, like doing anything differently, or it's just one of those unfortunate, freaky things that it just happened?
Both?
Both. It doesn't change me at all. I still got to do it. I'm not going to drive, so it's just one of those things you have to roll the dice, and maybe next time I'll pick a little bit better, way to put it in my luggage that I'm carrying on. That way I get more cards in there.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
That's I mean, I'm glad it is not a bad ending, then
it was a good ending.
You can laugh about it now, but I'm sure at the time you were sweating some bullets there and so now I'm assuming I don't want to put you on the spot. This will be probably the most on the spot question. I'm assuming I know the answer, but you probably have collectibles insurance as much as like I do.
We have it's covered under the homeowner's insurance.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to sound like a commercial, and they're not a sponsor, but it's collectibles insurance will cover stuff like that. God forbid that didn't have a happy ending. Also, even anything shipped to you or by you is also covered, just for reference. I can talk to you, off the air on stuff like that. But I was just thinking when you were telling that story, I'm thinking, well, worst case scenario, but because I used to use homeowners too, there's some qualms about that. But again, that's another show, another day. So how do you, especially with vintage? I love vintage too, guys. I'm finding it. I don't know about you guys. I'm finding that I don't do as many shows as you, but I'm finding it. It's harder to obtain it as far as a dealer and a collector to buy collections. I used to have better luck probably buying collections 3-4 years ago than of late. Without giving out all your secrets potentially, like how do you go about obtaining vintage, whether it be for your personal collections or even your showcases?
You hope and pray things come up to the tables. There's one. We'll look at, and it's no secret, we look at Craigslist, try to find somebody, within, a decent weekend drive or something like that to try to buy from. Just friends that are in the hobby that pretty much they just have been buying and just want to resell. They just buy and sell, buy and sell. Yeah. It is very hard. It's very, very hard, especially any like T cards, anything pre-war, things like that. Especially out here, it seems out on the West area, there's hardly any of that. You get a lot of 60s, 70s, some 50s, but there's not a lot yet.
I think the biggest thing that's changed buying the vintage is the younger collector that's coming in now. You'll see a lot of those guys at the shows that are trading their new stuff to get into the vintage. So that's, that's drying it up a little bit more too. There's a lot more people doing the vintage than there was, say 20 years ago.
Yeah, and also
no
I think
doubt.
a lot of people just aren't selling. They just don't want to sell vintage right now. A lot of, like we were, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, we would buy the new to keep, or buy the new, sell the new, buy the old stuff, and keep it.
Just sit in a box. Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of that going on now too.
Yeah, it's a great point. I'm seeing, and I'm sure you guys are too. You do more shows than I do. I'm seeing a lot, and I like it. But I'm seeing a lot of younger collectors, uh, like you said, get into the vintage side. Whether that's just straight out buying it, or even like you said, trying to move their modern stuff and changing it into a vintage. And I talked about this on the show after the national. I saw a young man, guys. He had to be, I didn't ask him how old he was. I put him at like 12 to 14 years old. He was, I was at the table looking, and he was, 5 feet away from me at the same dealer's table, and he had three raw Hank Aaron rookies in his hand that were obviously the dealers, and he looked intent, like he was mulling over, whether which one he wanted, or pondering the purchase. I so wanted to, like, I was kind of done looking, and I wanted to be a nosy body and just kind of hover and see what like the end result was, but it sort of gets my nature, so I didn't. But I really wondered, but I found that refreshing for let's say he's 12 to 14, which is where I kind of would guesstimate. He never saw Hank play, at least in person, but he knows the significance of an iconic card, and I mean that's a big purchase. Obviously, I don't know, what kind of money you have, but you're seeing the younger set, make not only bigger purchases but get into the vintage side, and I'm glad, because I think it's maybe I'm over embellishing it, but it's kind of respect. I mean, we wouldn't have, the modern guys wouldn't be here without those guys before them, and sort of I always say you got to respect the past. It's always nice to see a younger person sort of get into the vintage, and if they collect modern too, that's great. I do a little bit of both, but my heart's really in vintage. Are you seeing even more of that with not just someone selling to you, but you're seeing a lot of more younger folks get like kind of looking for vintage and buying vintage as dealers?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
There is a lot of
Yeah.
younger guys doing it now.
It was nice too, like you're
Yeah.
saying, refreshing. It was nice at the national when 12 or 10 to 15-year-olds come with their dads or uncles or whoever they were with, and they kind of combed through the new stuff, and then they were looking at the vintage, and they were just popping off names, Bob Gibson. Oh, look at the Ruth, and the Mantle, and it's they don't even have to read. They just look at the face and they know who the player is. It's not it's nice that either wherever they learned it from, grandfather, dad, uncle, whoever. It's kind of nice to listen to them, go gaga over those guys rather than some of the new players. Oh, it's Mike Trout. It seems like there's a little bit more appreciation there, for the vintage or in the older players than there is some of the newer players.
That's a great word. That's a better word. That's the word I was kind of looking for, rather than respect. Just the appreciation, right? Hey, these guys could play too, right? And we could do a whole show on, they did it clean back then, or it wasn't some of the stuff that came, but again, it's I like to see it, because I always feel sometimes we sort of forget that, or we move on from it without uh, appreciating it or respecting it. And so whenever you see it, it's refreshing to see. Could talk about the difficulty. How did you get? A lot of people were on the outside looking in at the national. Talk about the process to get your table at the national.
We've been doing the lottery, every for a while, and then we had somebody who had a table and offered it to us, or had a booth, and they said, do you want, part of it this year? I give you part. And I'm like, okay, so that was just the 1 foot through the door. Nothing set in stone. Of course, you still have to be, selected by them. But other than that, it was just kind of luck of the draw. Somebody offered, knew that we've been wanting to get there, and we were going to be there every year, either walking the other side of the table or being behind. But that's how we got it, was just being offered a few months ahead of time, saying, hey, I've got a little bit of space. Do you want part of it? So, and I can't that.
Yeah. Now, do you know your status for Cleveland, or is it too early?
It's too early.
Zero.
It's zero. Yeah. From what we heard, we went to all the meetings. We were there for all the meetings and all the way through Sunday or Saturday. They didn't have one Sunday because it was done and over. But some of the guys that have already been there, 3s, 2s, and 1s, didn't even get in for Cleveland. Wow. So it's a lot smaller venue from what they were saying on the maps and everything. But with Chicago, I figure we go to Cleveland and we can get in, go to the meetings and do everything, that we're supposed to, that we want to do. We want to do it right, and get our foot in the door and see if we can get in back in Chicago again after Cleveland.
Yeah, well, listen, I hope, I hope that's the case. And, it's funny. People think, it's funny. I get asked all the time, guys, like, John, are you setting up? I'm like, it's not that easy. Even if I really want to, like, I'm going. But even if I wanted to, the likelihood of me getting a table is tough. And I think a lot of people that, a small percentage have gotten like their space that way. And it's probably more lucky than good, as they say. How was, so you got, you were set up, however it was done, it doesn't matter. You were there. How was your show? Did you get a chance to walk around much? Your thoughts? They expanded the Chicago by 200,000 square feet. Kind of your overall thoughts and setting up at your first national too. Was it everything kind of like you thought it would be? Just kind of your overall review.
It was more than I expected.
Yes.
And John, it was the first show I've ever done in my life out of the hundreds. I've done hundreds of shows. That is the first one I actually had to work at. It was incredible. I was exhausted every night I left there. But you know what? It was the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
So
agreed. Yeah, it's the expansion. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I hear you. I mean, I walked 25 miles in the 5 days I was there. But you know what? We circle this week. It's really almost the same week every year, give or take a couple days. We circle the week, right, guys? Every year. For me, I let my employer know, like, hey, this week, these at least 4 or 5 days, I'm going to probably not be here. Thankfully, I'm a teaching assistant, and it's summer school, and it's easier to take a few days off during the summer school year than in the regular school year. So it kind of works out. I had a job before this one a few years ago that I was like pulling teeth to get time off. And even when I got it, I would get a guilt trip. Like, we really need you, and I'm like, I gotta go do. I'm past that, thankfully. But yeah, we circle it every year. It'd be nice. I don't know how you do it. I mean, let me ask you this: do you think the process to being able to set up, would you change anything, or you really think it's the fairest way?
I think I wouldn't change a thing. Honestly, I think it's fair across the board. These guys that have been doing this for
40 years,
30 years, 20 years, they deserve it. They put their time in, they put their work in. I think right now we're just seeing more collectors, more collectors/dealers, whatever you would like to call them now, that are trying to just get their foot in. So it looks like, you say 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, pre-COVID, it really wasn't like this. There wasn't that many people beating down the door. There was a list, but not as bad. Now it just seems there's so many people trying to get into it. So the emphasis is like, there's thousands of these people on the list. but it should. I don't think it should change. If it's not broke, don't fix it. I understand. They want to change things. Fine, but it's an easy process. Simple process.
It's made it this long.
Yeah,
and it's the best show every year.
Yep.
So you don't need to change it.
Yeah, the whole selection, the whole lotto is fair. If it's pretty much just put your name in the hat, and go from there, that's fair enough. If we don't get drawn, hey, we'll be there next year.
Yeah, and you know what? It's nice to hear you say that. You're like, hey, we may not get in, but this is how it needs to be done. It's nice to hear you say, hey, the guys that have been there 30, 40 years should really, have their spot until, unfortunately, maybe they're not around.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's later rather than sooner. And we see every year they do that kind of in memoriam in the lobby there for those that are no longer with them, which I actually think is a great sign of respect. And
yes, it is.
So let me ask you: you're on the West Coast, obviously. I'm an East Coast guy. This isn't Tupac and Biggie, but I've actually said, guys, I'm a fairness guy. Like Chicago's kind of dead center, so kind of it's fair to everybody. But Atlantic City was super fair to me. I get to drive to it. Whether there's another Atlantic City show, I don't know, but I appreciated it because I got to drive. But in fairness to you guys, I've been on this show and said there really should be something on the West Coast. We have the Atlantic City show. Why shouldn't the West Coast have one on their coast? I think it's the fair thing to do. Kind of your thoughts on that, and what city
Well,
I mean, is Las Vegas, I mean, for you it's probably close, right? What cities on the West Coast you think would be potential candidates if they decide to go that route?
I think our answer is going to surprise you. Good.
I think Vegas, no. I wouldn't do one in Vegas. Honestly, I think Seattle would be good.
Yeah.
Seattle would be great. I really don't know if I would go back to Southern California.
Put it this way: do you want the National on the West Coast?
No, I don't. I don't want it.
Don't want it on the West Coast.
I don't.
It doesn't.
That does surprise me. Why though? I'm not a West Coast guy, so maybe I don't know the answer. That's why I'm asking.
They're two different shows. They're two different coasts. The East Coast is all about the history and the nostalgia of it. You can get all the good cards there. And the West Coast is very social.
Two different types of show.
They're two different types. Yeah,
two different types of people.
It's crazy. But yeah,
that's the West Coast. It's the West Coast is great. You meet a lot of people. There's a lot of opportunities with cards, but just the knowledge, it's a lot. It's a lot thicker. The history is a lot better on the East. I understand a lot of dealers don't, because we went to the 2006 Anaheim, and a lot of the dealers, I'm going to throw out names, but a lot of them didn't want to come out there. They took their buy year. And which I understand, they're doing 53-foot trailers full of stuff. It's not cheap. I think it's just as easy, like my thoughts, Chicago. Leave it in Chicago every year. It's simple. It's easy for everybody to get to. Easier. It's a 4 hour, 3.5 hour flight.
Yeah, 3 hour flight.
3.5 hour flight for us.
And long as the airline doesn't lose your
yeah, exactly.
Well, I've heard people say like they're fine with it being in Chicago every year. Like that's not an uncommon thought. Yeah. And frankly, I'm okay with that. I mean, I can't drive. Now I know a lot of people don't like the city of Atlantic City. So I understand that. I'm not going to Atlantic City for the city. I'm going because the National's there.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
So I just, I go to sleep in my hotel room and then I go to the show when I wake up. But I understand that. Cleveland's going to be nice for me next year, guys, because it's actually closer. I'm closer to Cleveland than Atlantic City. So it's 5 hours and 5 minutes. So I'll be driving to Cleveland next year. So, I wouldn't mind if it was in Cleveland every year from a selfish point of view, But Chicago's kind of like the center of the United States. So I get that. I get that thought promise. I get that premise. You know, Seattle. You mentioned Seattle. I've never been to Seattle, but from people who have went that I know, they said it's a great city. You got sports teams there. Now you got the NHL. You obviously have the Mariners for baseball. I'd love to see it in Seattle. So you're saying you would rather be in Seattle than even like Southern California potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Even
would.
even Las Vegas is weird because we do shows in Las Vegas, but when you're in Las Vegas, there's too many other distractions outside the show that takes a lot of the money out of the room. So with the gambling
Yeah,
and all that, so
yeah, probably on a smaller level, Atlantic City a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, Atlantic City's not Las Vegas, not anymore. At one point, they were sort of parallel. I think that those days
yeah,
are, in the rearview mirror. But that's a good point with Vegas, right? You got a lot of other things besides even gambling, which that's probably number one. But you got shows and stars and just so
exactly.
many other things pulling you. So I mean, I appreciate the honesty. I'm surprised to hear that. I mean, do you feel like there's more people that feel that way than just you? Have you heard that?
I've heard it. Yeah, I've heard it last because everybody's been talking, trying. Hey, why doesn't the national, come out west? People have said Vegas, SoCal again, Seattle, even Dallas, Dallas Fort Worth area. But there's a lot of people that I know or that I've talked to doing these Southern California shows, Northern California shows, that would just rather just go fly to Chicago or to Cleveland, to do it. Or they would even, if like Atlanta was brought up, they would even fly there. They would rather have it outside of their area, which I don't, maybe it's a travel thing. Maybe it's like, hey, I want to leave my area to go, visit this area and see what it's about or something like that. Or it's just a weekend, getaway or week getaway for them. But a lot of guys I talk to, they're like, they're really, they don't care if it's there or if it's not. They're like, sometimes they're like, okay, yeah, that's fine. I'd rather go to Chicago anyway.
And the one thing I want to clear up here too, I'm going to be hated for this.
Controversy.
The Burbank Card Show is not the West Coast National.
Yeah,
It's not the National at all. It will never be the
Yeah.
National. So
it's a great show.
It's a great show.
It is.
But there's so many things you'll see at the National that you
Yeah.
will never see anyplace else.
Yeah, I try to
Yeah.
in a nice way. You just somebody always say, oh well, it's just like the National. I don't need to go to the National. Well, really, it's not. It's you at the National. You're going to see hundreds and thousands of different things that you will never see out here on the West Coast.
You're going to see the history.
The history of baseball or basketball, football. You've got gold in there. You've got all these auction houses with all these one-of-one pieces. The Babe Ruth bat that was there in Chicago. The Panini, all the different things that you can do. It's like I said, nothing knocking Burbank Card Show. Great show. Rob, EJ, everybody, great people. And they don't say that it's the West Coast National. It's a lot of collectors that are saying it. But these guys got to remember that they're two different levels. There's so much that you're missing out. You got to at least do the National once in your life if you're a collector. Once.
Yeah, no doubt. It's the Mecca.
Yeah.
I've used that term too. And I agree with you guys. The National it's the National for a reason.
Yes.
Until they do two in a year, which I honestly hope they don't. I know
Never.
that's come up, like doing two. Or I've even heard this, I'm sure you have too, doing two Nationals and having one be like Chicago and then having it alternate each coast as the other one. So there would be a Chicago National every year. This is a rumor I heard. I don't know how much truth or how much people are just talking, but what I heard is if they did two Nationals a year, one of them would always be Chicago, just like tradition, and then it would alternate on each coast each year. So for let's say next year, it'd be Chicago and Seattle, somewhere
Okay.
Anaheim, and then the year after that, it'd be Chicago, Atlantic City, or Atlanta, somewhere on the East Coast. But I think it's like a lot of things, right, guys? And I'll get your take on this. the more if you overdo something, it's sort of the bloom comes sort of off the rose, right? We look forward to the national every year because there's one national. It's sort of the same week. We circle it on our calendars. We tell our employers and we tell our family, you won't see me these 5 to 7 days. I'll be in this city. It's my hobby vacation. I
Yep.
love you just the same, but I'll be back on this day, and life continues again, right? I think if we do two, I think listen, there's still going to be a card show and big, huge card shows, and I get it, and it'll still be widely attended. But I just think the aura will the glow will sort of dim a little bit.
Yes.
I agree with
I'm
you.
not saying the lights will go out. They'll be both would be well attended. I just think some of the mystique and the luster will come off anytime you do two or something. When we think of even sport, there's one World Series, there's one Super Bowl, there's one Masters, there's one Daytona 500. If they did two Daytona 500s, or they split the baseball season into like halves, and they had a World Series champion in the first half, and then they did it again, it's not the same. And so I'm not for two nationals. Kind of, have you heard that, and your thoughts along those lines?
I haven't heard the two, but my thoughts, no. It does it. You look forward to that once a year. If it's one of those things now that you'd be like, okay, I'm looking for something, look forward to something twice a year now. It just kind of takes away from all the excitement and the build up, and you've got, that's your time, that's guy time, or if the wives go, hobby, the women in the hobby, things like that, that's that time. If you want to break it down like regionally and all that stuff, it loses everything, especially if you do more than one a year. It loses something. It's gonna, after a while, it's gonna, like, okay, I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna go to this show instead of both. Or they're gonna say, there could be one on the West, and like you said, Chicago. Most of them, some people are gonna go, well, I know what's out here on the West. I want to go to Chicago. So one may get more attention than the other, and it may or may not last. It's just, there's just one show just gets that excitement going.
And the other thing you got to think about, I'm poor. That's going to be expensive. Let's be truthful.
No, it's true, right? It's 2 weeks of hotel. It's now 2 round trips, dependent airfare, depending on where you live, and if it's not drivable. It's. I think what would happen, guys. I think you said it yourself. I think people would be only selecting one, so people will still go to one, and that's where the luster comes off, right? One of the mystique about the national is you got one shot at it every year, not two. And so if you can't make it, or we lost it the one year with COVID-19, and that stunk, and people missed it, and I think we were chomping at the bit when it came back, right? Because we missed one. I don't want to see two. I think it will hurt, and I don't think we need to now, guys. For something we kind of already talked about, you got all these regional shows now. You got the Burbank show. We have what's called the East Coast National here in White Plains, New York, which is a very good show, but there's only one national. And same thing. They call it East Coast, and it's a great show. You've got Culture Collision in Atlanta. You got the Dallas Card Show. You've got all these regional shows. I don't think you need two nationals. I think if you keep it to one national, that mystique and everything surrounding it will maintain for the end of time. I think you schedule two, and it just changes the vibe. It just changes the feel of it. And I think some people will obviously go to, but I know for what you said, I would have to pick one, whatever one, and only go to one, and that kind of stinks. I kind of like to look forward to going to the one national, not having to pick which of the two nationals am I going to this year. I like the fact that there's only one, and it's like time to make hotel and airfare, and let's kind of go. And so I hope that rumor that I've heard toyed about, I hope it stays just that. I'd like to see it. I know Baltimore's been mentioned, Atlanta, like you guys said. I mentioned, it's funny you mentioned Seattle. We did a hobby hotline show where we kind of talked what cities could the National be in, and Seattle was one I brought up. So, maybe we'll see that. Powers that be will kind of be in charge of that and whatnot. But I hope they keep it to one. So, kind of coming down the home stretch. So, you guys, I purchased my first card. When I go to the National, I don't set up, as I said. I kind of go in there. I have a list of like 4 to 6 vintage, IPC Hall of Fame graded rookies, and so I have a list of 4 to 6. I'm trying. I'd be happy with, knowing I'm not getting all 4 or all 6. I try to get 2 or 3. Your guys purchase. My first purchase of this year's National was from you guys with the Bob Gibson, and funny story. My card match partner, Danny Black there. I looked at and I kind of walked away. I was just kind of gauging, and he's like, "Hey, I know he said to you, hey, he's looking for a Gibson rookie. You treat him right, he'll probably put you on the show." I didn't even know, like he did that unbeknownst to me. That's kind of, we mess with each other. I'll make the story a shorter one. Obviously, I made the purchase. It's a great card. I'm happy to own it. Happy to own it. It's actually behind me in the Show Your Slabs case. My big body's blocking it, but trust me, it's there. And so we'll have that story in the September SCD. They chose that we took a picture with me holding the card with you guys, and SCD Sports Collectors Digest. I did a national kind of roundup column for them. I sent in a bunch of pictures for them, whatever ones you wanted to use, and they ran with that one. So the guys are in the SCD along with with me holding the card, and so will forever be linked, at least
There you go.
in that. It makes sense now that you're on. Like I'm a man of my word anyway, but like I really wanted to talk as a fellow dealer, even though I don't do the shows like you do, the same kind of shows. I wanted to talk about that dynamic and how you acquired, how you get your stuff there. I think people are interested. It's not I dream a genie and you wiggle your nose and like all your stuff next to your table. I think some people might think it works like that.
Yeah.
Nice. It'd be nice if it worked like that. But I love the dynamic of how you get there, how you set up, how you acquire inventory. I think people find that interesting. I know I sure do, and I'm sure others do as well. How many shows are in your rotation per year, would you say?
10 to 15, maybe.
10 to 15, that are set in stone.
Yeah.
And then we try to find some small ones. It doesn't matter the size to us. The shows, small shows, cozy shows are nice. It means, more to buy, things like that. But we try to find things in between also. So 10 to 15 in stone, and, the rest of them we just try to squeeze in where we can.
All right, I thought one more question because it's on one of my bullet points, because it's an issue as a dealer myself. Sometimes, not so much now, but back when I had my store and even a little bit after that, I always had that dilemma. Like, you acquire a card and you're like, I kind of want to keep this. I don't want to sell it. Is that an issue, or are you pretty good at like, hey, this is a business and I call it attachment. Like, I got some, attached. Even during my store days, guys, I would have stuff like not out, like behind the, in the back room, and my partner would be like, "Why aren't you selling that?" I'm like, "I don't kind of don't want to." He's like, "I don't get you, man." Like, you ever have that dilemma, or not too much?
We do, but we do this thing. It's called the stupid price. So we'll take the product and we'll put it in the case and we'll put a ridiculous price on it. And if they want to buy it at that price, they can buy it. If not, hey, it goes in a box and moves on with us. So
yeah, it's funny you said that, because I do the same. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
There's cards I kind of like. If someone wants to pay that, like I don't know if they will, but they can take it. But if not, I still own it. And
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then
It's
sometimes if you don't get the money, it turns into a great conversation piece too, especially if it's something rare. You just get more people talking about it, just to talk to people about things.
Yeah,
But,
that is true too. That's a great point. Is certain cards are a conversation piece. One of the things I'm a big Jackie Robinson guy. About 2 years ago, I got my Grail, which was the 48 leaf Jackie. A lot of
Wow.
people that follow the show knew about it. I kind of talked about it, and then I got it. And people that come to the shows that I set up that listen to the podcast said, "Hey, where's the Jackie? Where is it? Did you bring it?" I'm like, "No, I'm not bringing it. It's not for sale." And they're like, "Man, you should bring it and put it in the case." And it's not that I don't want to. I don't trust myself. Like, God forbid I lose it or I miss, or when we hear stuff being taken at shows, like it's more like like all the thoughts that go through my mind. Like I get in a conversation with someone else, and somehow someone finagles the case open. I look and it's gone. I'll be crushed,
Yeah.
And so it's not really for sale. I've had other people like, bring it. I want to see it. I want to, hold it. And I know I heard you talk about it for like a year leading up. I feel like there's a connection, and I'm like, it's not really for sale. But there are some cards, not of that ilk, that I'm attached to. But like you said, I'll price it, like you said, at a price that's probably not probably it is too high. But my thought is exactly the same, right? If someone wants to pay that, they're gonna own it, and I won't. But other than that, it's coming back home with me. I just won't do that. I won't do that with the Leaf Jackie. So
Yeah,
I just have all these like doomsday scenarios going through my mind. So
the worst thing is somebody will show up and buy it at your price.
Yeah.
That's a great card.
And then I have to go try to find and that's the other thing. The market can sometimes be volatile, and sometimes it's harder to replace something than we think of. We think it's easy, but it's not always easy. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. So I don't want to do the temptation. I have a big, fear factor that something's going to happen. It's going to go missing, and then I'm going to really be mad at myself. So I don't do it. I know people will ask me like, where is it? Even to this day, and it's not even a new purchase anymore. And I'm like, I don't trust myself to bring it. Like, so, if I'm close enough with you, I'll let you come over my house. We can talk about it over a beer. So, or whatever you want to drink. So, well, guys, I appreciate you making some time and sharing some of that behind the scenes stuff. Funny story. What turns out to be a funny story with the missing luggage and cards would have happened. Thankfully. And give out where people can find what you're doing, any website, social media, anything you want to share where people can check out what you're doing.
Okay, we're on Instagram. It's the SportsBros.nv. eBay is the Sports Bros on eBay. That's pretty much about it. And we usually we'll advertise where we're going to be, what shows next, things like that.
Please come up and talk to us.
Yeah. Anybody out there, we're not bad guys. Just come by and let's have some laughs. Let's talk.
No, sport. And I can attest to that personally in meeting you guys. It was fun, and we talked a little bit, and here we are doing it again. So check them out, and how cool is that, right? You get to do this stuff with your brother, right? That's pretty.
Yeah. Wouldn't change a thing.
Exactly.
Heck, it's fun by yourself, and then you get to do it with your brother even more so.
Yeah, it's more of a family thing too. Mom travels with us. She's 78. She travels with us and does all the shows too. So she's known as the Sports Bro Security. So yeah,
I love
we
it.
got it all set up for her. She's our security.
That's awesome. Well, guys, continued success. I hope to see you in Cleveland next year. I'm sure I'll see you one way or the other. Hopefully, maybe it's you're on the other side of the table from me again, and I'll check another card off my want list again. We'll do it all over again.
Sounds
You
good.
got it. Sounds great.
All right, guys. Take care. Thank you.
You bet.
Bye.
Bye.